everybody. With our Bucket List Talks, we look to talk to travelers, travel founders, and travel experts to give you their expert insights, tips, and inspiration to help you go and create and live your own bucket list. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Keith Crockford, who's the founder of the Bucket List Company, a company that provides adventure travel and bucket list adventures for small groups. So today, Keith is going to give us the lowdown on trekking to Everest Base Camp and also some other highlights that you can experience when traveling to Nepal. So Keith, how are you going again?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Nice to be back.
Very good. So let's get started now. So give us a little bit of an overview on exactly what is trekking to Everest Base Camp for anyone who doesn't know a lot about it.
Okay, so Everest Base Camp has become one of the world's most famous longest treks in terms of its duration. You're looking at around about a 13-day trek to base camp and back. Quite a lot of people don't do the back bit and they get the helicopter back down, but it's definitely worth actually walking back down and enjoying the scenery as you're de-acclimatizing rather than struggling on the way up. So I would advise to actually not take the easy option out and actually trek back down. But in terms of base camp itself, obviously it starts nowadays from Lukla, and you fly from Kathmandu to Lukla airport and begin your trek there. Obviously it used to start from Jiri and have another couple of days of trekking to actually get to Lukla, but most people nowadays will fly into Lukla itself.
Okay, so when was the first time you actually went on and trekked to Everest Base Camp?
Probably about 20 years ago now. So I've been fortunate enough to do it 12 times, I think now, with groups.
Awesome.
And I was there in April. Yeah, I come back in April and did it again with another group. So yeah, kind of, it's one of those that I enjoy going out and doing once a year. Like I don't think I'd want to do it every month, but going out there once a year is definitely worthwhile going and doing.
So what is it about the trek that you like so much and like sharing with others?
Two things really. First is probably the people. I just love the Nepalese people. They're so friendly. Like I love going back and seeing my friends in Nepal, and we stay in the same tea houses every time and I get to know them. And it's obviously, having not been there for the past 3 years since I last went because of COVID. So it was nice to go back and see everybody again. And then secondly, I think it's just the whole nostalgia of being in the Kumbh and being in the Himalayas and being around those big mountains, and like thinking about the journeys that have taken that trek to go and explore, high altitude for the very first time, and taking the same steps as Hillary and Tenzin, just that's the bit that excites me is, you're just amongst 8,000 meter mountains, and it doesn't appear like they're that big because you're kind of walking along next to them really.
Awesome. So now let's talk about the planning for going on this trek. So looking at your website, there are 3 different kind of like itineraries you offer. So you've got your regular kind of like Everest Base Camp, then you have another itinerary, which is, I believe is Goiko. I don't know how to pronounce it. Gokyo, so lakes, and then you also have another one where you do the, so you climb some peak, like Island Peak.
Yeah. So there's the standard Everest trek, which, like I say, is a 13-day trek up and back. There's a couple of rest days within that, acclimatization days we like to call them. We still go out and do a trek on those days. But in terms of, I wouldn't shorten it and lose out on those acclimatization days. I think they're super important in terms of getting you to 5,200 meters to get to base camp. Obviously that's very popular in terms of, that's what most people do when they go to base camp. In terms of Nepal itself, you've kind of got 2 trekking seasons to go in. So you've got the spring and you've got the autumn. So between sort of end of March into May is the main season. If you want to go and see base camp busy with lots of people climbing Everest, then that's the time you want to go. And then the other time in autumn, so between October and November, maybe late September into November, obviously base camp's very much quieter then. There won't be so many people summiting Everest at that point. So the trail will be quieter, and there won't be so much going on at base camp either when you get there. So that's generally what most people do. Obviously, like I say, we do the Everest Base Camp and then Island Peak as well. We find that a lot of people, you know, when we look at a lot of our trips, a lot of people like to get to the top of something rather than saying they've got to the bottom of something, which is what you're kind of doing to go to base camp. So we add the Island Peak in, which is still a trekking peak. It's kind of that first step into true mountaineering, if you like. But it's, like I say, it is a trekking peak. There's no additional skills that you need to go and do it. Any additional training that's needed is kind of given before at the bottom, before we go up. So it's kind of, although it is a super hard challenge, it is still achievable by anyone that wants to. You don't need any special skills to go and do it. So that's quite a popular trip for us as well, in terms of people get to go to base camp and then they then on the way back go and summit a mountain to say they've been to the top of something and then go back to Kathmandu. So they're kind of ticking two things off their bucket list in one go, really. And then the other one that started to become quite popular is the Gokyo Lakes Trek, which again, you visit Everest Base Camp, and then rather than coming back in the same direction, you then go round to Gokyo, see the lakes, which are truly stunning, and then come back. That kind of adds like another 4 days onto the trek. So our trip from leaving the UK to back to the UK for that one's about a 21 day trip, whereas our Everest Base Camp Trek is kind of a 17 to 18, depending on flights.
So you think it's worthwhile adding that extra couple of days for each of these options?
I think it depends on what you want to achieve. Like the Gokyo Lakes Trek, when you get to base camp and then carry on round to Gokyo, you're adding a bit more to the altitude. Going over the Choi Loy Pass is actually quite a hard day. You do probably need to be a little bit fitter for both of the Island Peak and the Everest Base Camp ones. But I think in terms of getting away from the crowds, you know, if you don't want to come back the way you came, then yeah, the Gokyo Lake is definitely worth adding the extra time onto. And like I say, if you want to summit a mountain at the same time, then, you know, definitely look at ticking Island Peak off at the same time, really.
Awesome. So you were talking a little bit about fitness levels there. So to do Everest Base Camp, what kind of fitness level does someone need? Are there any kind of like limitations?
No, I think in terms of, you know, if you could go out and walk 10K, then that's kind of adequate. I think the problem that people forget is the fact that anyone can go and walk 10K in a day, but you're doing this for 13 days back to back. And that's the bit that people tend to struggle with more, is not the overall distance in a day. It's more the fact that you're getting up every morning and doing it again and again and again and again. On our treks, baggage is carried by porters rather than you carrying. So you're just carrying your day pack. So I suppose, you know, we could look at, you know, there's various options of how you do it. Obviously, you could pre-book it with a company like us, and we arrange everything for you once you get to Kathmandu. Although we're based in the UK, we do have quite a lot of American clients who fly into Kathmandu and then join our group trips. You know, you can go and do Everest Base Camp on your own. You don't need to have a guide. You don't need to have a porter. You can organize all your own permits. You know, it's a very easy path to follow. You can't get lost. You could, you know, trek it on your own. And then obviously you could fly out to Kathmandu and then find a local outfit out there to go and take you up it. I think in terms of, depends on the sort of personality people have got. Obviously group travel isn't for everyone, but I think when you're on a 13-day trek, it is nice to have somebody to talk to. Kind of a long time to be on your own. And I think the tendency is for people, if you are, we have our set itinerary for each day. Some days we get into the tea houses quite early in the afternoon, which gives a nice afternoon of relaxation and recovery. I've spoken to people who have kind of gone, I kind of pushed on an extra 2 villages yesterday and shouldn't have done. I got in late and now I'm feeling, the altitude's affecting me. So having somebody there with experience to guide you, I think, is quite important, especially if you're going to altitude. But, like I say, there's no reason why you can't do it on your own. And if you're that sort of, if that's, you're inclined that way, then it's perfectly fine. Our clients like to have people around them and want to be chatting to different people. And, we kind of have a UK guide and then we'll have 3 or 4 Nepalese guides as well. So actually our group can spread out during the day, go at people's own pace. Nobody's rushed, get into camp at whatever time they like to get into the tea house, and it's not a problem then.
Awesome. So you were talking there a little bit about groups. So what's the typical group size?
So we're kind of 12 to 16 is our group size. So we recently had a group out to base camp, which I led. I had 8 in mine, and then we had a Gokyo group, which had 14 in the Gokyo group as well then. So we actually, for the first part, all stayed together and everyone had a really nice time, and there was always somebody different to talk to every day. And, it was a bit of, camaraderie amongst the group to go on. So I think it just depends what sort of traveler you want to be, really. But I think, having somebody organize the tea house, we always stay in the same place. We know the nicer places to stay. It's just those little tips, really, that if you've not been there before and you're trying to find it all on your own, it's quite a challenging, where do I stay tonight? Which is a nice one to stay in? How much should I be paying? All those questions, really.
Yep, no, definitely. So what are your recommendations when it comes to selecting the company?
Again, I think, obviously do your research online. When you get to Kathmandu, most people will go and stay in Thamel in Kathmandu, which is the main tourist place of Kathmandu. When you get there, there is literally, they're selling Everest treks on the street. Like every other shop is a trekking provider. I mean, we've been using the same trekking provider now for about the last 15 years. So we've got a really good relationship with ours, and we wouldn't go anywhere else. But, I think it's very difficult to make that call if you're there on the street. So, my advice would be, if you are going to go, would be to have something pre-booked before you get to Kathmandu. Whether that is, you've booked it personally, or then whether you've joined a group trip. We bump into so many people who think they've booked a group trip, and then when they get there, they were the only 2 people that booked onto the group trip, so they've ended up doing it on their own anyway.
Yeah.
And then we've had, so it's difficult because when you get into the tea house, there's various ways of doing it, and the way we do it is that all food is included right throughout the whole process. Which means when you get into the tea house, every tea house has a very similar menu: breakfast, lunch and dinner. And then you just order off the menu and you don't have to worry about it, and everything's fine. But we kind of sit there sometimes and look at other people, and then they come out and then suddenly they bring the bill out for everybody, and now everyone's having to split the bill 15 ways to work out who's had what, and then people want change and they haven't got any change, and it just gets a little bit messy. And we walk in, order, get up, walk out again, and they're still sorting their bill out and having to think about who's going to give them their £1 change and whatever. So we've kind of worked the process over the years, and I think we've now got it right, that actually it's just much simpler and no one has to worry about anything, and it's just everything's smooth, and the only thing you've got to worry about is actually putting one foot in front of the other and getting to the next tea house.
Yeah, sounds good. So other things for planning kind of perspective. So Are there any kind of like things like medical requirements now with COVID, etc., you need before getting into
No,
Nepal?
no, Nepal. Nepal is just proof of vaccine now or a PCR prior to travel. Um, they changed it pretty much about a week before we went out there in April, that you had to have a PCR test to leave the country, but they've scrapped that idea now. So yeah, it's pretty simple. They've opened up pretty much everything over there. There's no masks, there's no need for any of that. So that's all pretty simple that way. There is, at the minute, there's quite a bit of a problem with the Lukla flights in terms of Kathmandu airport's getting really busy with international travel. And that's having quite an effect on the domestic airlines flying in and out of Kathmandu airport. There is talk of moving the Lukla flights to an airport that's 4 hours away from Kathmandu. And it's not a nice drive. It's quite a windy drive to get there.
Yeah.
And we're still waiting to see what happens with that. Most flights did go from Kathmandu in the spring season, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with the autumn season, to see if they move that airport. They're putting quite a lot of infrastructure down in it, Ramchat, and I think that potentially is going to be their long-term plan, is to move that, because there never used to be any lodges or hotels down in Ramchat, but they're popping up quite a lot now. So I think over time, I think they will move those flights down there. Helicopters will still take off from Kathmandu. And I think more people will look at the option of getting a helicopter from Kathmandu to Lukla rather than flying in and driving down to Ramchat. So that will come out I think in the autumn. We'll see more from that perspective. What else from a planning perspective? So luggage allowance. You're quite restricted on what you can take on the planes from Kathmandu to Lukla. So you're only allowed a 15 kilo limit on the aeroplane. You can pay for more, but the problem with that is if the plane is overweight, your bag might be on the following plane and come behind you. And with the weather like it is at Lukla, we have seen bags not arrive because actually you were on the last available flight out of the day and no more flights came out and your bag's been left back in Kathmandu. So we always try and advise people not to do that and actually to stick within the 15 kilo weight limit that they're allowed to take. Obviously for things like Island Peak where you need a little bit more kit, that's a little bit more challenging, but most people for base camp, if they think about, buying light kit rather than going with, sleeping bags are the main thing that cause the issue. I mean, you can have a 1 kilo sleeping bag or you can have a 2.5 kilo sleeping bag. You can kind of pack enough underwear in that extra 1.5 kilos. If you kind of have a decent sleeping bag, that's not too bulky and not too heavy. So that's one of the biggest issues really. And then the other thing I guess is because of the airlines in with the weather, we always have a buffer zone either side of our trip to make sure we've got a couple of free days to make sure that if we did get stranded in Kathmandu or we did get stranded in Lukla, we're not going to miss our international flight back home again.
Yeah.
We see so many people who are, I'm flying out this morning in my international flights tonight, and then the weather comes in and they're now panicking because they can't get to their international flight. So always make sure you have a couple of days in the planning buffer at the end, just to make sure, if you did have any problems, you'll be all right.
So back to the packing. So what other things? So obviously you indicated like the sleeping bag, that's pretty key, making sure you get a lightweight one that's high quality. What other things do you recommend?
So in terms of base camp itself, I tend to trek base camp in a pair of approach shoes rather than wearing boots. So that cuts the weight down a little bit. In terms of, like I say, you're in tea houses every night, so you don't need anything from a camping perspective unless you're on the Island Peak one. So really it's just trekking clothing. The problem you've got is you're going from one extreme where you could be trekking in 26-degree heat and you're in shorts and t-shirt, to being at Everest Base Camp where you've got your waterproofs on in, you know, a warm down jacket and everything else. So you do kind of need to pack accordingly in terms of that. But obviously, you know, if you're happy to wear the same clothes for a few days, then you'll be fine within the 15 kilos really.
Okay.
And you know, you don't get weighed either. It's only your bag that gets weighed. So you tend to just see everyone wearing the heaviest pieces of clothing they've got on the aeroplane, just to make sure that they haven't got to put it in their bag. So everyone gets on the aeroplane with their down jackets on, in their battery packs, pockets, and anything they got their camera around their neck, and just trying to keep the weight out of the bag. But yeah, I mean, you know, I think mine was 12 kilos last time, and I had, you know, a spare change of clothes for every day, and wasn't short. So it's pretty easy to pack, as long as you have got, you know, you haven't got heavy down jackets and heavy sleeping bags and things like that.
Yeah. So the two seasons, is there much of a temperature difference between the two?
Yeah, like I say, so you can, you know, you can be in 0 when you get up to base camp, and then 28 degrees when you're trekking down in Lukla. So
Yeah.
there is quite a, and even in the evenings when you're low down, because of the altitude you're at, you know, it's the radiation off the sun that keeps you warm. You know, the air temperature isn't actually that warm. As soon as you're out of the sun, it's cold. But, you know, when you're actually in that radiation of the sun, you'll feel nice and hot. But,
Yeah.
you know, when that sun goes down, even when you're low down, it still gets cold in the evenings.
Very good. So now let's talk about, you fly in, you've got Kathmandu. So normally, as you said, you put in a buffer. So what's Kathmandu like? Is it kind of like worth spending a day there, checking it out?
Yeah, definitely. Kathmandu is hustle and bustle. You know, all you hear is car horns going all the time. You know, there's mopeds everywhere. Like I say, if you're staying in Thamel, that's like the main touristy area where all the trekking shops will be, and there's, you know, nice restaurants. And yeah, I mean, definitely there's plenty to do in Kathmandu. You know, so we end up with normally about 3 days in Kathmandu, 1 before, 2 at the end. If flights are all on time, there's plenty to do in Kathmandu for those 3 days to keep you busy, really.
Awesome. So now let's have a little bit of a walkthrough on some of the highlights on, you know, the itinerary you guys have for getting to Everest Base Camp. So giving us a little bit of a feel for what we can see and, you know, what it's like.
Yeah, so when you arrive in Lukla, it's, you know, we don't spend any time in Lukla. Land, bags on, off we go. The path for base camp is, you know, it's a well-trodden path. It's a well-built path. You know, it's very easy to follow in terms of, like I say, you can't get lost. There are villages all the way up to base camp, and you know, we have a set route that we know where we're going on each day. So day 1 for us is Lukla to Monjo. It's about 4 hours worth of trekking, and you know, we just follow the river. And actually, you know, the thing that most people think about with Everest Base Camp is, you know, you're going to be going uphill all the way there, and you're going to be going downhill all the way back. But actually, you know, if Everest Base Camp is described as Nepali flat, and Nepali flat is, there's a little bit of up and a little bit of down, and that keeps going whether you're going up or you're coming back down again. So like, there isn't that, you know, uphill on the way up and downhill on the way back. You actually start off the trek going downhill for quite a bit, back down to the river again. So that's day 1. Like I say, just following the trail, follow the river, couple of little suspension bridges to cross, and then that's super simple. The day 2 then is from Monjo to Namche Bazaar, where Namche is the main Sherpa hub of the whole Kumba region. So that's where it's the biggest town on the way up, really. And we stopped there for 2 nights. That's got the highest Irish bar in the world. in Namche. So most people go and have a Guinness in the highest Irish bar in the world, just to tick that one off their bucket list as well. But again, there's loads of shops in Namche, loads of trekking shops. You know, you can buy supplies all the way up to Everest Base Camp. So you haven't got to take loads of snacks and things like that with you in your bag. You can buy all that stuff on the way. So day 3 then for us is an acclimatization day, and our acclimatization day, we walk up to the Everest View Hotel, which gets about another 400 meters of altitude from Namche. And then we have a coffee at the Everest View. If the weather's in our favor, that will give you your first view of Everest if you're there. And then we come back down for lunch in Namche, and then everyone has the afternoon to have a wander around, explore. Just, there's loads of bakeries. Like, that's the famous thing for Namche, is go and get some apple pie in one of the bakeries. So yeah, it's really chilled out in Namche. Like, I love spending some time in Namche. Day 4 for us then is to Tengboche, and that is where the monastery is in Tengboche. Tengboche is quite a hard day. Again, you spend the morning going downhill back down to the river again, and then the afternoon is spent with a long zigzag climb up to Tengboche. But you tend to be in the sun for that if the sun's out. So it's people find that quite tough. It's about a 2.5 hour up, zigzagging the path. So people normally enjoy resting once they get to Tengboche. But once you get to Tengboche, again, the views open up. Amadablam, Lhotse, Nuptse, Everest. You can see that from Tengboche. Kind of the valley opens up once you get up to the top then. Following day then is Tengboche to Dingboche. This is now starting to get cold now. We're gaining in altitude. Tengboche sits at about 4,000. So we're approaching, high altitude now, where people are starting to feel it a little bit. We stay at Tengboche for 2 nights as well. Again, on the second day, we head off to, we actually follow the path on the way to Island Peak. Again, just gaining a little bit of altitude before lunch, turn around, come back and have lunch in Dingboche, and have the afternoon to have a shower and sort your kit out and get ready for the next day. Following day is from Dingboche to Loboshe. This is a really tough day. People do struggle on this day. You get to lunchtime and you follow the river up, get to lunchtime, and then after lunch is a big climb then up to where the memorial is, and the memorial sits right on top of the hill, and people kind of look up, and it's quite a climb to get up there. And then obviously you spend some time at the memorial. It's quite a nice place to kind of just have a wander around, appreciate where you are. Obviously it's there for everyone who's lost their life in the Kumba. There are memorials everywhere. It's kind of quite a sobering place to be, although you kind of, you appreciate the views of where you are and why the memorial is where it is, and why people are actually, they've used that spot as the memorial. So we spend some time there. There's prayer flags everywhere, and have a wander around, and you'll probably, if you're into mountaineering, you'll spot some of the names from some of the mountaineering books that have been written in the past. And then we go down into Loboshe then, and then obviously at that point it is now getting cold, and then generally when we're in Loboshe, we'll have an early morning start to go to base camp. And what we do is we'll be in Loboshe, we'll trek to Gorik Shep, which is the last kind of area where there's a tea house before base camp. Get to Gorik Shep, stop, have some breakfast, because we generally get up early before breakfast, and then head on to base camp, spend some time at base camp, and then come back to Gorik Shep then. spend the night at Gorik Shep. And actually Gorik Shep's there's more tea houses there now than there ever used to be. There only ever used to be one and a half tea houses there, and the chance of you finding a bed were really remote. And I have spent a night on the floor in the dining room before because there wasn't enough beds, but we haven't had a problem getting a bed for a while now. Following day we get up, for those that want to. There's a peak behind Gorik Shep called Kalapatar, and Kalapatar gives you the best view of Everest at sunrise. I mean, you actually see less of Everest at base camp than you do of Everest along the trail, just because of how you're stood looking at it is kind of hid behind. But if you climb up to Kalapatar early in the morning and get there for the sunrise and see the sunrise come up, then that's definitely, if you're not too tired from the day before of going to base camp, then I definitely recommend doing Kalapatar the following morning. Some people do it all in the same day. Like I say, we split it out, so you've got more chance of actually succeeding Kalapatar the following day after a night of sleep and a night of rest, really.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's basically repeat it on the way back down. There are a couple of options on the way back down, but generally the standard trek, you kind of miss out every other one of your camps to come back down, is generally how it pans out to come back down. And then, like I say, we arrive at Lukla, night in Lukla. There's some good bars in Lukla for a celebratory beer once you get there. And then you generally stay in Lukla and then fly out the following morning. Generally, because you're up at altitude and in the mountains, flights are more common first thing in the morning before the cloud comes in. So you always want to try and be on the first couple of flights, because that gives you your most guaranteed chance of getting out, really. So we always try and make sure we're on the first flight. There's 3 different airways, 3 different airlines that fly in to Lukla. So generally you want to try and be on the first plane of that airline, if you like, and there's only 16 seats on each plane. So you need to make sure you've booked well in advance, really. Don't rock up and go, have you got any flights today? Because the chances are you're going to be on one of the later flights, and if the cloud comes in, then and the other thing about booking with a local outfitter is, if there are delays, you give them the problem of getting you home. You haven't got the problem of having to do it yourself.
Yeah.
So you generally, if you're booking with one of the big outfitters, it does give you a little bit of weight when it comes to, how many flights do we book with you? Like, I need my group on that plane first thing in the morning, so make sure you bump everybody else or whatever. And that does happen quite a bit.
Understood. No, I've been there in some other small places. When you're on these small planes, it's very easy to find that you don't have a plane flight. So if you're planning for yourself. So what would you say is, in one word, in a small sentence, why you think everyone should add the trek to Everest Base Camp on their bucket list?
I think if you like long trekking, multi-day treks, the scenery is probably scenery you're never going to see anywhere else. Just being amongst those 8,000 meter mountains is just something truly special. Like I say, the people, like the Nepalese people, are just the friendliest people you'll ever meet. Like I say, the scenery is stunning, and just you're following in the footsteps of so many amazing expeditions that have gone before us to summit those mountains. Just to say you've been there and you've seen it and you've been part of it, and is just truly a magical thing. I mean, and I think from my perspective, like having, like I say, been there 12 times already now, like the weather's always different. The seasons are always different. The colors are always different. Like, you never see the same thing twice, I don't think. Like, you always look at something in a different light, or see it in a different way, or the last time you went, it was cloudy and this time it wasn't. And yeah, I just think it's one of the most magical places to go to that, you can see, really.
Awesome. So you've done the trek, and then I know you have an add-on. So what other things can you add on to your trip if you're interested in exploring a little bit more in Nepal?
Yeah, so I think, obviously, I mean, the trek we haven't talked about is the Annapurna trek, which is the other side of Kathmandu. So Everest is to the right, Annapurna region is to the left. So that is another possibility. There are shorter treks around that area as well. And actually that area is more accessible out of the two seasons than the Kumba region is. So, if you are going that way and you're only going to be there in the summer, in June, July, August, you've still got the possibility, even though it's monsoon season, you've still got the possibility of trekking over in the Annapurna region more than you have in the Kumba region. In terms of what else there is to do, there's some great whitewater rafting out there. You could, like I say, we had a bolt on down to the Chitwan National Park,
Yep.
Which is where, not that I've ever seen one, I've been there plenty of times, but they've got the Royal Bengal tiger down there. They've got the black rhino there. It is stunning down there. Lots of crocodiles, and that's kind of a nice 3-day, 4-day add-on down to Chitwan. Again, I would vote to fly down there rather than drive down there. It's like a 25-minute flight or an 8-hour drive along bumpy lanes. So, certainly take the flight option. Pokhara, where the Annapurna goes up towards, that's definitely worth going up there for a couple of days if you want to add on your stay to Pokhara. Again, you can fly to Pokhara, fly from Pokhara down to Chitwan, so you can kind of do a bit of a circular route if you want to. But the lake in Pokhara is lovely. Like, there's loads of hang gliding and that sort of thing over the lake. But yeah, there's plenty of activities that you can do whilst you're in Nepal. I think people tend not to extend the trip so much, purely because the time you're trekking, depending on how much holiday allowance you've got or how you're doing traveling, quite a lot of people are like, well, I've just about got enough to go and do Everest Base Camp, never mind add another few things on. So I guess it depends what sort of traveling you're doing, really. But yeah, Nepal is a stunning country. Pretty much interestingly, on the Everest Base Camp Trek now, you can get Wi-Fi all the way up to Gorik Shep. Phone signal's really good if you have a Nepalese SIM card in your phone. So if your phone's unlocked, that's the best way of doing it. I'm not sure what it's like from the States perspective, but from the UK perspective, you certainly don't want to be using your provider over here in Nepal. It will cost you a fortune. So, but getting a Nepalese SIM card if your phone's unlocked is really reasonable, really cheap, and you get signal. Again, obviously, because of the villages on the way up, they have invested in the infrastructure to give them mobile communication, because there isn't phone lines going up and down, so they do rely on their mobile phones to that extent.
Yep. So just to finish up now, so there are a couple other treks, like there's the Mera Peak, and then there's what I can't remember the name of that one.
Dablam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who are they for?
So they are for mountaineers who have already got some mountaineering experience that want to tick off a 6,500 meter peak, nearly 7,000 meter peak on Amadablam. I mean, I think Amadablam is, for me, I think is my most favorite mountain in the world in terms of the look of it. And, it's so iconic. It sits there on its own. I'm yet to do it, but it's on our list, and I will be blagging that trip sometime when I get to have my go at it. But yeah, I mean, those are two big mountaineering trips that, if you want to, I mean, Mera Peak technically is still classed as a trekking peak, but I would say you do need some previous mountaineering experience before you have a go at that one, really. But yeah, again, that's like getting out there and being amongst those mountains and being on top of one of them. And, you know, the distance height then from you to Everest doesn't look so big when you're sat at 6.5 or 6,800 meters.
Sounds good. So the Annapurna circuit, so is that as good as doing Everest Base Camp, or is it just different?
I think it's completely different.
Yeah.
The nice thing about the Annapurna circuit is it is a circuit, so you don't get to come back the same way you came. You are amongst a completely different mountain range, and it is a lot quieter than what the Everest Base Camp Trek is like. So, you know, if you are one of those people that don't want to be trekking amongst lots of other people in lots of other groups, then the Annapurna circuit is definitely one to look at. We get quite a lot of people who do both treks, not at the same time, but they'll come back, you know, they've fallen in love with Nepal and actually they want to go back and they're just going to go back and trek that one instead of going back up to the Khumbu region. So quite a lot of people do both of them. They are completely different in the things you see, but they are, like I say, both uniquely special in what they are. And the mountain ranges down in the Annapurna region as well are just as stunning, and you kind of trek all the way around them. So it's definitely, again, one to look for. I think Everest Base Camp becomes more iconic because it's Everest and people want to go and say they've been to Everest Base Camp. But I think, you know, a lot of people who don't want to be trekking amongst the crowds tend to like the Annapurna one more as well.
Awesome. No, very good pointers to kind of like give people some options. So now let's talk a little bit about the bucket list company. So let's give a little bit of an overview on what you're trying to do, to kind of like experiences you'd like to give people.
Yeah, so the bucket list company, like I say, we organise group adventure trips for no more than 16 people. Our unique point, I suppose, is the fact that there's always one of our guides on the trek as well. So although we use local guides, there is always one of us there as well, which a lot of people do like that. I think, you know, where it comes in is like, you know, when you're in Kathmandu and, you know, you've been dropped off at your hotel and been told you'll be picked up at 9 o'clock in the morning to go and do something else, you're kind of then on your own for a bit. Whereas, you know, where should we eat tonight? Where's good to go and eat? Where should we go? Those are the questions that we kind of get asked and from that perspective. In terms of our trips, we've got about 34 different trips around the world. We started off predominantly trekking, but we've kind of still have the trekking trips, but we have a few more kind of what we call our best of trips now. So we do things like Chile and Easter Island, and we've got a best of Nepal trip for people that don't want to go trekking for 13 days. It's just a 4-day trek, and we do Chitwan and we do Pokhara, and we kind of all the things, all the add-ons that I just talked about, we've kind of put into one trip there. So, and then we do things like the Great Wall of China, Machu Picchu, Kilimanjaro, yeah, all over really in terms of what we do, and we're launching more trips all the time. And like I say, predominantly most of our customers are from the UK, but you know, we do have plenty of people coming from Canada, America, who have found us on the internet and kind of like the way we run our trips and have met us at the airport and, you know, have joined in with our groups. And it's been great to have people from over in America and Canada join the trip. So, you know, we don't particularly advertise over in the States, but, you know, we're more than happy to have clients coming and joining our trips. And you know, maybe in a few years' time, we will come across to the States and advertise a little bit more and try and get a few more people coming with us as well.
Awesome. So what kind of an experience do you want people to walk away with after going through one of your trips?
I think in terms of our trips, I think you know, we tend to find the people we get on our trips are people who have got, you know, they've taken the minimum amount of time off their holiday to go and do the trip, and they want to get everything ticked off that's on the list, and they want it all organized. They don't want to think about anything. They just want to be shown around and get all that stuff off. And, you know, we've just done we've just done, I've just come back from Peru last week, and we did the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. No, we didn't. We did the Lares trek to Machu Picchu. And, we were there for 11 days. We did tours of Lima, we did tours of Cusco, we did the Inca Trek, we went to Machu Picchu via the Lares trek, we did Rainbow Mountain, we came back to Cusco again, and then we flew home. And, everyone was like, I can't believe how much stuff we actually managed to fit into like those 10 days. Like, it was an experience of a lifetime. And I think, from my perspective, I think with our trips, there are plenty of places in the world to go and visit. And I kind of feel that you don't want to leave a country thinking, oh, I wish I'd done this, or I wish I'd done that, or I wish I'd done something else. Like, I want to feel that we take you there, you get everything ticked off that you were expecting, and then you can then go and look to go somewhere else the next time and not have to worry about that one again, really. I suppose that's what we look for.
It sounds awesome. So here's a few questions I'd like to ask each of our guests. So question number one, why do you think everyone should look to add more adventure travel to their life?
Why should you add adventure travel to your life? I suppose I probably answered this last time. It'd be interesting to see what my answer to this question. For me, it's seeing new places, seeing new cultures, and meeting different people. I'm fortunate enough that I get to go back to a lot of the places every year. I have some truly fabulous friends that I've met over the years in these countries. And, just experiencing different things with them. COVID for the last 2 years has been really hard because, like, I haven't been out, most of my friends live around the world now. They're people who I see every year and I haven't been able to see them. So from that perspective, I think it's seeing different cultures, meeting different people, and just experiencing what their lives are like in their country, I suppose is why people should do it more and more.
Awesome. So some of these questions are similar to the ones I asked before, but because the audience is continually changing, so let's get them up.
I can't remember what I said last time, so it's not going to be
Very good. So what would you say to anyone approaching or just reached 40 who's going, oh my God, it's all downhill from here?
Well, it's definitely not downhill from here. I'm in that same bracket, and I want to do new experiences all the time. I think if you look at our trips, I would say our average age is probably between 35 and 47. I would say our average age of our groups are, and predominantly, I think the reason why that is they've had their children. Their children are older now. They don't want to go on holiday with them anymore. They want different things, and they're like, well, if I'm not, let's go and do it now. And I think she was 68 on my Everest Base Camp Trek, and she got to base camp no problems at all. One of our guides turned 70 next year. Like, he would race most people up to Everest Base Camp or Kilimanjaro still and still be ahead of them. So yeah, there's no reason why you shouldn't be traveling. I think if you ask that question at 60, you could probably come up with a few more excuses, but at 40, there's definitely not any excuses you can be using.
Very good. So what's your definition of ageless living?
Definition of ageless living. Well, I hope to be doing this for, Dave, one of our guides. I've just shipped him off to the airport. He's gone scuba diving with a group, and like I say, he's 69. So I think if he is the epitome of ageless living, I think he doesn't see retirement anytime soon. So I think, if you can still do it, just keep doing it. And I think the fact that I think it's what keeps me. If I wasn't traveling all the time and going up mountains all the time, then probably I would feel a little bit. But I think because I'm living this lifestyle, it just makes you think I don't think I'm 42 anymore. I mean, I've been doing this job for so long now. I've been doing this for 17 years. So I still think I'm 28 sometimes.
Very good. So this is a good lead into, so what does living your best life or a legend life mean to you?
Well, I think I'm fortunate enough that I created a business that allowed me to live the lifestyle that I want to live and travel the world. So for me, you know, I get told all the time that, you know, I shouldn't be going away on the trips. I should be in the office and building the business and, you know, in doing those things. And I'm like, well, that's not why I set the business up. I didn't set the business up to sit in an office 5 days a week and watch everybody else go and have a lovely time. So for me, it's, you know, I suppose I created my ideal life in terms of what I do now, and I'm going to continue to keep doing it, I suppose.
Very good. So do you have a life philosophy, a life mantra you live by?
Never stop exploring.
Very good. And lastly, 3 life lessons you've learned in life that you think would be of value to other people.
3 life lessons that I've learned. Well, I suppose there's the Nike slogan of "There's no such word as can't." Never stop exploring, because I think that's super important, and that doesn't have to be adventure travel or overseas travel. I think one thing that lockdown taught me was actually I discovered quite a lot of places that were more local to me than I ever realized, in terms of, you know, having to take the dog for a walk and, you know, trying to explore new places, and found lots of new places. So I think, you know, never stop exploring, whether that is within adventure travel or whether that is just locally or what's close by to you. And then what else have I learned? I suppose for me, it's always about, because when I set up my businesses, I was working for somebody else, and, you know, they went bust owing me a considerable amount of money. And it was the day after that I decided to set up my own money with a minus bank balance. And I knew nothing about running a business. I knew nothing about what to do. And I just said, I'm going to be responsible for my own destiny now. Like, if I'm going to be poor, it needs to be my fault that I'm poor, not somebody else's fault, because I've worked really hard and they've spent all of our money. So I think it's just, you know, you can do it, in terms of, you know, going back to the whole Nike slogan of "There's no such word as can't." You know, just keep working hard to get to where you want to get to, because you can achieve anything you want to if you put your mind to it. And, you know, I've only learned to run a business by researching, reading, you know, those sorts of things, really. So, you know, if you're not happy in what you're doing, then change it. You know, you've only got one opportunity to live this life, and that's it, as far as I'm concerned. You know, we can't get to 70 and go, oh, I wish I'd run my own business, or I wish I had done that, or I wish I'd done this, because this is our only chance to go and do it now, really. So make that change.
Awesome. Keith, once again, it's been wonderful talking to you. Certainly very informative. I think we've got a lot of people inspired now to go off and head off and do Everest Base Camp.
Yeah,
or
well,
at least...
one thing I was going to say, I've just looked across my desk, and if anyone was interested, there I have written the ultimate guide to Everest Base Camp, which is on our website. So if you wanted to put a link up to that one,
definitely. Very good.
You can download that one, and that's pretty much got everything that I rambled on about today in there. So
awesome. So once again, thank you. And definitely I'll put the link in the notes so people can go off and download that to get more information. But for anyone interested in learning a little bit more about you and to get that guide, how can they find you online?
So they could go onto the website. So www.thebucketlistcompany.com will take you to the website, and the guide is on there. And if they want to follow me, my life is pretty much on Instagram, in terms of my trip photos and where I've been and everything else. And my Instagram profile is Keith_bucketlist_adventurer is my Instagram handle, so they can find me on there as well.
Awesome. Once again, thank you so much, Keith.
No worries. Thanks very much.